Start the recording. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming on tonight. Oh, looks like it jumped ahead a little bit. Gotta love technology, right? But thank you for hopping on tonight, everyone. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about letters to the editor and op-eds. Last week we had a social media workshop, and so this is part two, where we're going to talk a little bit more about traditional media and how to get your letters to the editor and op-eds published, written, the whole thing. So. Just to start off a little bit, my name is Connor Epley. I'm from Virginia Interfaith Power and Light. VIPL, we collaborate among people of faith and conscience to grow healthy communities by advancing climate and environmental justice. And I'm joined tonight by Amanda Robertson from Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy. So I'll let her introduce herself.
Everybody, my name is Amanda Robertson, as Connor said. I am the social media coordinator with Virginia Center for Public Policy at VIC. Our mission is to engage people of faith and goodwill to advocate for economic, social, and racial justice all across Virginia through its policies and practice through education, prayer, and action. Thank you so much for having me, Connor. I'm happy.
Of course, we love VIPL and VICPP. We love working together. So glad we could put this on for everyone. We can go ahead and move on to the next slide. So before we begin, I want to ask everyone here if you want to put it in the chat or raise your hand or come off mute, however you want to do it. I want to know what your experiences with letters to the editor and op-eds are, whether you've maybe read some that you thought were really good, maybe ones that needed a little bit of editing, whether you've written them before or worked with someone on one. I'm curious to know what your is with them. So does anyone want to share? All right, I'm gonna pick on Janice because I know she read a really good op-ed a little while ago.
I don't mind talking. I apologize. I am off camera again because I'm double dipping with fixing dinner and the works after hours. But
All good.
I have, I guess, a little bit late in my career to the party of writing letters to the editor, but learned about them as a useful tool to be able to communicate with our legislators. So I really just started paying attention to offerings like these to learn a little bit more about it. I've published two op-eds, one that Connor hugely supported and helped me get there, and quite a few LTEs now. And in fact, Connor, I'm going to be totally transparent here and let you know that I put in an abstract to actually give a presentation about LTEs. So I'm here to plagiarize and steal from you and get ideas on what might be good tips for others.
That is amazing. We're glad to, be happy to help with anything you need for that. That's amazing. Does anyone else want to share their experience, whether they've written one before or maybe have read one or two?
I've never written any, but I have read some good ones, and those make me pay attention to what's going on and try to find out more. And then if I were to actually try to write one myself, that means I need to dig in and find out more about the topic and make sure I understand it so that I could write something convincing.
Yep. Well, hopefully this tonight will help you a little bit with that. But glad to hear that. Does anyone else want to share before we move on?
Hey, Connor, it's Roberta.
Hey, Roberta. Hey, Roberta.
I'm off camera because I'm sitting in my car, but um, I work at the Interfaith Center and have worked for years helping people write op-eds and position their organization or their mission or their message. And I will tell you that I have found them to be so valuable when they especially have a personal perspective and they're not just hitting you over the head with facts. And I think you once you get it published anywhere, it really doesn't really matter where. Once you have a link to that op-ed, you can repurpose that over and over again. So it's the one chance to have the unmediated voice of your experts or your colleagues in a well-respected, newspaper or online. So I'm a big fan and I'm excited that you're sharing this. And I think we all need to do as much of this as we can. And my last thought is not be afraid to look for blogs and look for other options, when you can't get it in the Washington Post. So that's my thought. And thank you for hosting this.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for sharing that, Roberta. And I could not agree more. And we'll, as we go along, we'll talk a little bit more about us using our unique voices and offering our unique perspectives in LTs and op-eds. So thank you for sharing that. We can go ahead and move on to the next slide. And so another question before we begin, I just want to know, what does everyone want to take away from the workshop today? What do you want to be able to accomplish or do after we hop off this call? Has anyone maybe thought about that question before hopping on tonight?
I'm just hoping to collect a few more tips on how to increase the possibility of it getting published.
Nice, nice.
I'm not sure who that was, but I agree with her. That's my goal, is to how to get them published, and also to distinguish between letters to the editor and opinion uh, letters or pieces.
Nice, nice. And I've seen some chats that with people who maybe are newer to writing, specifically LTs and op-eds, but who have written before. And so, yeah, I hope the tips and stuff we talk about tonight helps with that. I think if you're already, a seasoned writer, I think, making the transition to LTs and op-eds maybe takes a second, but once you get the hang of it, it's a pretty similar style of writing. So, yeah, we can go ahead and, if anyone else doesn't want to share, we can go ahead and move right along. So when we're talking about letters to the editor and op-eds and really anything kind of in the realm of communications, but especially letters to the editor and op-eds, I always ask people to consider the goals, audience, and messenger. So what is the goal of the piece you're trying to write? Is it to get people more educated on the issue? Is it to issue a call to action to our legislators and try to influence policy? Is it to, offer kind of a broader commentary on maybe an issue that's going on in the community? So think about what your goals are. Think about who your audience is too. So, it's yes, John, we'll send out copies of the slides afterwards as well as the recordings. But with your audience, it's kind of hard to write pieces for everyone, or quote unquote the general public. And so definitely trying to tailor your LTE and op-ed or anything you put out to an audience, and specifying who you want to reach the most. And so maybe different ways of saying things or different pieces of information might hit or might be more impactful for different audiences over another. And so consider who your audience is, who are you trying to reach with your piece. And the last thing to consider is your messenger. So who is the best person, or who's the best organization or community leader to be the messenger for this LT or op-ed. That's honestly a lot of the work that I do and Roberta does and Amanda do with helping people amplify their voices, as we try to support those messengers who might need help, like writing an LTE or writing an op-ed. But especially if this is part of a group project, if you will, if you're doing it with your congregation or an organization that you work with, trying to identify who that messenger is. So maybe, it might be your executive director one day, but then the next piece you write, it might be an impacted community member who is on the front lines of the issues. So consider who the best messenger is for your piece. Just a little overview of op-eds and LTEs. So the purpose of an op-ed stands for opinion editorial. LTE stands for letters to the editor. I'm going to go back and forth probably tonight using them, but the purpose of op-eds and LTEs are to share observations or offer maybe an expert analysis on a topic of interest. They can also contribute to a larger conversation on an issue that maybe is, playing out currently. So like, I know a really timely issue that we're all talking about right now is our energy bills and how they're going way, way, way up all of a sudden. And so that's an example of a timely issue. If there, is a protest, about a specific issue, that might be an opportunity to find a timely issue or to do a timely piece. Really anything that is you see a lot of news coverage on, or maybe want to offer a different perspective, or offer kind of your own unique voice to it. Trying to find those timely issues and offer that new perspective. Just kind of like what they are for and not for. Op-eds and LTs are for expressing a unique point of view to make arguments and influence public opinion, or maybe influence a policy outcome, whether it be at the local level, the state level, or the federal level. They're not really best suited for making an announcement. So it's not really for a press release or for you're announcing a new campaign or anything like that. And you also don't want to overly promote a campaign that you're working on. I've seen some op-eds that like every other line, they're mentioning either the organization they work for or the campaign they're working on over and over and over again. And there's a balance. Like definitely you want to mention some stuff, but it shouldn't be every line. So don't overly promote a campaign. And also, it's not really suited for what you would probably consider a diary entry. You want to, write it kind of in an essay format. You want to make a compelling argument, definitely offer your perspective, but it's just a little bit of a different style of writing. So just kind of like a broad overview of what the purpose of LTEs and op-eds are and, what they're for and not for. So the key elements for op-eds and LTEs, they do vary a little bit, as Miss Margaret was alluding to. Both of them are written as an essay that clearly and quickly defines the topic, theme, and point of view that you have or the author has. Op-eds are typically a little bit longer, so they're more like a longer essay, usually 600 to 800 words, depending on the outlet you're submitting to. Trying to maybe, I usually shoot for around 700 words just to make it versatile. And then LTEs are a little shorter. So typically they're 150 to 250 words. These are typically more of op-eds are typically longer pieces that you maybe work on for a little bit longer. LTEs are shorter, more response oriented. So usually you'll see LTEs, like let's take the Richmond Times Dispatch, for example. They'll publish a lot of stories and articles, and people will like read them and like write a letter to the editor to respond to them. So they don't have to necessarily be in response to something an outlet's already posted, but it's good if they are. It's to kind of like provide a public comment or a perspective on the story that's already been covered. So they're typically a little shorter in nature. Both are relatively informal style of writing. Again, we want to include personal opinions, personal anecdotes, personal stories, and we want it to be generally accessible to most people. And so it's not really the place for a lot of jargon or a lot of acronyms without explaining the acronyms. You really want it to be relatable and that, most people can pick up and read and understand. So, with that, you want to use shorter sentences, shorter paragraphs. Sometimes you'll see just one sentence paragraphs for emphasis, but usually when I'm writing op-eds and LTEs, the paragraph isn't more than a few sentences, maybe maximum of 5. So you use kind of shorter, punchier sentences and paragraphs. And I think the main element to both LTEs and op-eds is you want to use your unique voice. The whole point of LTEs and op-eds are for people who have a particular insight to an issue, who can offer who have kind of a standing to, bye Roberta, have a good night, but have a unique perspective to offer. And so, you don't want to use ChatGPT or copy and paste something maybe someone else has written or you've written before. You really want to use your own unique voice to offer that new insight and that unique perspective. And then at the end, usually just a little byline with your name, your title, and if you're affiliated with any organization. So those are some key elements that we look for in op-eds and LTEs. So best practices and tips. This kind of is a little cheat sheet of how to get your op-eds and LTEs published and what different editors look for when you submit your LTE and op-ed. I'm going to sound like a broken record tonight. They want unique, relevant, and timely LTEs and op-eds that can be tied to current events or maybe a topic of interest. And you want to grab the attention of readers with a very strong claim. So you can usually do this uh, with the title and also the first maybe paragraph or two of your LTE and op-ed. You want to make a claim that people can like, yes, okay, let me read this. Um, so that you also want to share information that the outlet you're submitting to their audience may want to know. So, for example, there's an outlet called the Cardinal News. They cover a lot of Southside Virginia, so a lot of rural communities down in Miss Margaret's area down in Brunswick, and so they obviously are issues that impact rural communities or issues that are specific and local to Southside Virginia are issues they're interested in. Others like the Richmond Free Press, which unfortunately just announced that they were closing. They were great partners. We're going to miss them. But they covered a lot of stories related to Black Americans and Black Virginians. And so they are particularly interested in issues and pieces that are related to that. And so you also you might want to target a little bit. Some are more broad, but you want to review submission guidelines and what the paper is about before you submit to match that area of interest. Um, it's also like op-eds and LTs are great to help readers understand something new or trending. So another example, data centers. I feel like last year and this year has been, I've seen so many news articles about the rise of data centers. And so a lot of people offer op-eds and LTEs to help readers and the general public understand, some of the complexities with data centers. And so op-eds and LTEs are a great way to help educate people as well as advocate for policy. Another thing too, they offer new ideas and context and perspective that others may not have addressed. We'll kind of look at an op-ed in a little bit that kind of sheds that point of view, that sheds that light that maybe people hadn't considered before. We also, when we talk about justice work, we want to also provide information that improves people's lives, or at least has the potential to. So the op-eds and LTEs that we're writing, as we're advocating for justice, we want to include information in there that uplifts everyone. And like I said previously, editors love to publish op-eds and LTs that are not so overtly an advertisement for your organization or the work you're doing. You can sneak that in there and mention a little bit, but like I said earlier, it shouldn't be like the main reason the op-ed was written. So yeah, just some tips and tricks there. Submission checklist. So before you submit and send your op-ed in, I'll kind of run through these, make sure there's clarity, there's coherence, there's simplicity, like, making very convoluted arguments maybe is not the best place for an op-ed or LTE, especially like you can kind of maybe get away with it with an op-ed, but since LTEs are a little shorter, your arguments have to be very simple to the point and understandable. You want to check for again checking to see your unique voice and the tone of the piece is matching what you're intending to communicate, so kind of just vibe checking, if you will, the piece and making sure that that matches as well. Always making sure that if you're ever quoting someone or paraphrasing someone that they're accurate. I'm a little overboard, and I'll check a quote 3 or 4 times just to make sure I'm not missing something. So just making sure that those quotes are okay. And you want to make sure that, constantly and consistently throughout your piece, that your opinion is present throughout the entire thing, that you keep kind of hammering the point home of what the claim, that bold claim that we talked about earlier, you want to make sure that's present in the entire piece. And this is just my little extra credit offering. Make sure to have someone else review for grammar, tone, understanding, and spelling, and all of that. I have a rule: I never submit an op-ed or LT until at least two other people have looked at it. Just because, like, I don't know about y'all, but if I'm sitting there writing something for a while and I've looked at it a bunch, I always love a fresh pair of eyes to look at it because there's something that I'm probably missing. And so if you can, it can be a friend, a family member, it could be someone you work with, who can like just take a second look at it and make sure everything's good there. So yeah, just a little checklist for y'all. And real quick, before I move on, I want to pause just for a second to see, we'll have some Q&A time at the end, but I wanted to pause to see if anyone had any questions or needed me to clarify anything before we continued. You can feel free to raise your hand or ask it in the chat or come off mute. Okay, I don't hear anyone or I don't see anything in the chat, so we'll go ahead and keep rocking. So next I want to talk about actually pitching the piece. So you like at this point you've written, oop, um, at this point, you've already written the piece, you've got it proofread, you know which outlet you're going to submit it to. Everything's good there. Now you just need to actually send it in. So that process is going to really vary by who you're submitting it to, because every paper and outlet typically they vary a little bit in what their submission guidelines are. Whether they sometimes they clarify who can and cannot submit LTs and op-eds. You'll see this like if it's a local paper, sometimes they only want residents of a specific community, like a specific locality. If that's if you're the Virginia Beach Chronicle, like someone they might say, hey, we only want Virginia Beach community members to write LTEs and op-eds. So again, pitching it is going to vary a little bit by the outlet you're submitting to. So I always encourage everyone and really insist on everyone reviewing the target outlines or target outlet submission guidelines and following as close as you can. There you'll find how long it can be or should be, who can submit, who to submit it to, if there's a form maybe you have to fill out. So, and also like what topics they are seeking LTs and op-eds on. So always review that. It can be found under the commentary section if you look on the website or an about us section. Might have to hunt around for it for a second, but I promise it's on there somewhere. And then another thing too is if you're sending, let's say when you review your submission guidelines and it says, hey, email it to Amanda Robertson. It's always if you're emailing it directly to a person, it's also always good if they have a general opinion inbox. Sometimes they'll have like a info at Richmond Times Dispatch or something like that. It's always good to CC like a second email on. Case in point, we last spring we submitted an op-ed, and the person we submitted it to was out on maternity leave, so we didn't hear back for almost 2 weeks. And then someone was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I was supposed to be checking their email," and we didn't. Unfortunately, I didn't catch that we didn't send it to a general opinion inbox, so that would have helped us out there. And so just kind of a good rule of thumb of try to get as many eyeballs on it as possible. I also encourage people to submit LTs and op-eds sometime in the morning. So even if you're up late at night writing it, try to send it around like 8 or 9 a.m. in the morning. That's typically when the reporters and the editors get into the office for the day. And so it'll be right at the top of their inbox. I encourage people to try to avoid Friday afternoons and evenings. I don't know about y'all, but I have to remind myself to check my email Friday afternoon and evening as I'm getting ready to go home for the weekend. And so if you want to get your piece published and you want people to see it, I would definitely recommend trying to avoid that time frame and sending as early in the morning as you can. In the email itself, you definitely want to introduce the piece you've written. So this can be, you can include direct language from the piece, but you want to explain like who you are, why you're writing, what the piece is about, and you also want to try to convey, the the why now part of it. So like what is the event or the issue that makes this relevant? Like what is the relevancy of the piece? You want to try to convey that and your email doesn't have to be super long. It can be a few sentences of just explaining who you are and the why now. And like I said, if you want to take portions of your LT or op-ed you're submitting to convey that, you can. I also try to convey it in the subject line too. So you can even like if you have a title for your piece, that's a good place to put that or a shorter version of it. Just something that again is going to catch that journalist or that editor's attention of like, oh, this is okay, this piece seems interesting. Let me open this email. And I always put, unless it says otherwise in the submission guidelines, for what you put in the subject line, I always put op-ed or LTE colon and then what the title of the piece is, or what the subject line you're going to do. That way, when they're looking through their inbox, they can see who, like, what emails are submissions for them to review. We can go on and move on to this next slide. Just some more helpful tips when you're pitching the piece. I've every outlet that I've seen, one of their conditions for accepting LTEs and op-eds from you is that you're offering it to them with exclusivity. So what that means is you can't or you shouldn't blast out, like let's say you write an op-ed, you shouldn't blast it out to 50 news outlets at the same time trying to get it published. You want to go one by one because most of the time if you send it to the Richmond Times-Dispatch and the Richmond Free Press, if the Richmond Times-Dispatch gets it, the Richmond Free Press is not going to want to publish it as well. They want to, again, they're a little competitive, but they want originality in their work that they're publishing, and so you want to send it one at a time to different outlets. I also encourage people to set up Google alerts, and you can do this by just typing in Google Alert when you're signed into your Gmail, if you have a Gmail account, and just putting you can set up so basically if your name pops up on the internet, anywhere on the internet, you get an email alert saying like, oh, hey, we saw that, Amanda Robertson was mentioned in a article or something like that. This is helpful in case most of the time outlets will tell you if they're going to publish your piece and they'll give you a heads up like, hey, we're going to run this on Wednesday. That's not always the case though. Sometimes they see it and they just publish it and they don't email you back or acknowledge anything. And so it's helpful to, you'll get an alert saying, hey, like Richmond Times-Dispatch just published a piece, and it goes straight to your email. So I always find that really helpful. If you don't hear back after a couple days, I definitely suggest reaching out to them to check on the status. Again, unless the submission guidelines tell you otherwise. It varies based on the outlet, but if you are able to, I definitely recommend following up if you haven't heard back. And then after about 5 days or so, if you still have not heard anything and you followed up and you haven't heard back yet, I would go ahead and move on to a different outlet because chances are they may not publish your piece. So you don't want to waste too much time. You want to move on and offer another outlet the opportunity to publish it. And then last little piece of advice when you're pitching, I don't know about y'all, but I don't like spam or hackers or computer viruses. And reporters don't either. They're also afraid of those things. And so, unless it's an email they recognize, reporters often don't open attachments. So, like, they don't open PDFs or image downloads or anything like that. And so, when you're pitching your piece and you're sending it to them, you want to make sure that you just take and copy and paste what your LT or op-ed is, put it below your signature line, and then if you're able to also attach a PDF, it just gives them the option to not have to open a document from someone they may not be familiar with and risk getting a computer virus. So I know some reporters who literally they'll get press releases, they'll get LTEs op-eds. They will not read your piece if it's in a PDF only, or they will not read it if it's not like copied and pasted below the signature line. Like, I'm not opening that, not risking it, delete. So to make sure that doesn't happen to you, definitely copy and paste it there. But yeah, just some helpful tips when you're pitching your piece. And here's an example. I just wanted to show you all like what some submission guidelines might look like. So this is for the Richmond Times-Dispatch. I highlighted a few parts that are kind of relevant to what I was mentioning earlier. Their guidelines for LTEs are 300 words or shorter. So just there's a length requirement there. They say in the first bullet point that they favor letters that respond to perspectives and that were on content they've already published. So sometimes you can say the Richmond Times-Dispatch has previously covered the water crisis that Richmond had last year. You mentioning that in there is helpful. Um, the other thing I highlighted here is they don't, and again, this varies from outlet to outlet, but they do not want broad endorsements or attacks on political figures or parties. And so you can't just get on there and complain about an elected official you're unhappy with and have that be the entire piece. You can still call them out in like a sentence or two, but it shouldn't be every single section is this person's bad and here's why, this person's bad and here's why. And so they don't just, some examples of what some guidelines can look like. We have another example on the next slide for op-eds and opinion editorials. This is from the Virginia Mercury. They are more of a progressive news outlet, so they favor opinion pieces from diverse voices, underrepresented communities, women, young people. They don't typically take pieces from elected officials or candidates who are running for office. Their op-eds, they like them to be 700 to 800 words. And I highlighted there too, it talks about that your piece has to be original work that hasn't been pitched or published anywhere else. And then at the bottom, they say who you should contact. There's a name, there's an email. And so, again, just kind of an example of what different guidelines might look like and where to find them. So we can go ahead and move on to the next one. Janice, you might recall this. This might look familiar, but I wanted to go over an example of what an op-ed could look like and kind of using some of the things I mentioned earlier. In like making a piece. And so this article or this op-ed was published back in September. Me and Janice worked on it. And we wanted to talk about how extreme heat and healthcare cuts are a deadly combination. So we put that in our title. And we want to make sure that that's the claim that we're following through on the entire op-ed. And so from the start, we say, this summer, it's like in recent years has been like many in recent years has been really hot, like extraordinarily hot. And so we start off there with that little hook. We also talk about how like this past June was the hottest June on record since NOAA started measuring temperatures annually. And then we also talk about a previous piece that the Virginian pilot covered, where the Great Bridge in Chesapeake was malfunctioning because of the extreme heat. And so we're referencing something that readers may have already heard about, and also something that those at the pilot were familiar with covering. And so we're kind of, again, adding that hook again in there. And then we go into our claim. We say dangerously high temperatures can lead to severe heat-related illness, such as heat stroke, heat exhaustion. We talk about how, I don't know if y'all knew this. I didn't know this before I started working at VIPL, but extreme heat typically kills more people than any other form of extreme weather. More than hurricanes, more than tornadoes. Extreme heat kills more people by far. And so we wanted to make sure people knew that. We also go on to talk about how compared to previous years, where our emergency room visits for heat-related illnesses are skyrocketing. We had at that point over 3,500 Virginians who had gone to the emergency room for heat-related illness. And then we also talk a little bit too about how, extreme heat also impacts our mental health. There are those who maybe are on medications for mental health conditions that the heat interferes with. So if it's a very hot day, they might have a mental health emergency. And so we talk about that as well. We can go on to the next one. And then, as we're going on, we're saying, okay, well, yeah, of course it's hot, but why is this like what is the unique point of view that we're offering here? And also for those who didn't know, Janice is a medical professional, so this is why she was, the author for this, and she was talking about these issues. And so again, using that unique voice that we talk about and that perspective. And so we talk about how the recent cuts to Medicaid and medical services under the big, ugly, disgusting bill that passed Congress, how the recent cuts to Medicaid make extreme heat even deadlier because those who typically are at the greatest risk for being impacted by heat illness and heat stroke are also those who rely on Medicaid and those government programs to receive healthcare. And so you have these rising temperatures due to climate change at a time when people are losing access to their healthcare. And so it's kind of again, a deadly combination. We also wanted to, use words that spark imagery. So we used scorching summers. Like, I think when people read that, they're imagining, sitting outside on a hot day and it's just the sun is beating down on you. And, all you want is either AC or a nice cool drink or something like that. And so, again, trying to, yes. um, Sorry about that. Is my Amanda, can you hear me okay? Oh, my internet was being weird for a second. Sorry, guys. Um, we wanted to use phrases and words that spark imagery and can help people make connections to why this piece matters. And then we just come out and say it. We say, when we cut Medicaid coverage for nearly 10 million Americans, and we have these rising temperatures that are only getting hotter year after year. It's a death sentence. It's not a policy mistake. It's a death sentence. So again, using that, those, colorful language, and making sure people get the point. Um, then we go into that unique perspective again. We highlight, that she is a registered nurse. Why? So why does she care about this? Why are we even talking about this? Well, she's a registered nurse and she cares about the health of those around her. She also knows that the cost of prevention is much, much lower than the cost of crisis care, aka going to the emergency room versus preventing a condition from uh, happening in the first place. And so and here towards the end, if all the other stuff we talked about, how people are going to the emergency room more often, mental health visits are up. If none of that's getting to you, maybe you care a lot about fiscal priorities. So we talk about how the cost to taxpayers for crisis care is much, much more expensive than preventative care. And so we talk about, how ambulance rides are going up. There's more emergency department visits, more hospital days and hospitalizations, and of course, more fatalities. And then we talk about that fiscal impact that this policy has. So yeah, we can go into the next slide. And then we kind of close. This is the last section of the op-ed, and we end by saying, healthcare is a human right. That is one of our claims. Like, healthcare is a human right. Our elected officials need to do more about it and to protect access to healthcare for those in the community. And then we call on specifically the people in the representatives in Hampton Roads for Congress and Senate to restore medical coverage and protect Americans when they need it the most. For those who don't know, the Virginian pilot covers Hampton Roads stories and all that, so that's why we specifically tailored it to Hampton Roads. And we also, as I mentioned earlier, you always include a little byline of who you are so they know what your unique perspective is inspired by. So we mentioned that she lives in Chesapeake, so she's a member of the community. She's also a nurse, and she is a retired Army nurse and veteran who was in Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm. So we kind of close with that and explain why she is writing this in the first place. So I know that was a lot. And I stopped earlier for questions, but I'm sure maybe some might have thought of questions since then. And so I want to take a pause real quick, and I want to see if anyone has any questions, anything I can clarify. I did see something pop up in the chat, so I'm going to go there first. Sure, Carol. So if you type in, if you're signed into the question Carol had was can you explain how to set up a Google alert? Is it on a Google page or somewhere else? So if you're signed into Google, if you type in Google Alerts, it should be one of the first results that pops up. You click on there and it'll have this kind of like search bar that gives you the option to add an alert. And so basically you're putting in phrases or names of things that you want to receive a notification on if it happens to pop up on the internet. So you can type in your name, you can type in, like for me, I have all of our staff members in there, as well as Virginia Interfaith Power and Light, VAIPL, because I want to see what's coming up about the organization as well. But it should just pop up under a regular Google search. So does that answer your question, Carol? Okay, if let's see. You know what? I could probably Amanda, do you mind? Are you signed into a Google account on your computer? No, okay. I'm gonna try to share my screen. We were having some issues with my sharing abilities earlier, so if it looks a little interesting, please forgive me. But I'll give you guys an example of how to set one up. So let me go ahead and do that. All right. Can everyone see my screen okay? It probably looks a little rough, and I apologize. But you should be able to see most of it.
Yeah, I
Google.
can I can see most of it. I still see some of the gray boxes on there, but I can see most of it.
uh, so if you just type in Google Alerts to your search bar, the first result that should pop up is Google Alerts. So you just click on that. Um, and it just pops up with people. Well, let's say I want to create a alert about Amanda. So I can just say create alert after I type in her name, and then boom, she's added to my list of alerts. I can add in Virginia. Uh, So if I want to add in the organization that Amanda works at, I can add in Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy. So anytime that this is mentioned on the internet, I get a notification about it. Um, so yeah, it's relatively pretty straightforward. I see another chat popped up. All right, perfect, Carol. But yeah, that's all there is to it. So I can go and I'll stop sharing my screen. Um, all right, does anyone have any other questions?
Connor, I just have a comment, if that's okay.
Of
When you
course.
were when you were sharing with one of them, I don't remember which one, that they give preference for when you're responding to one of those articles. I've just made it a habit when I'm reading to kind of read with the idea of responding. So just to give an example, for one of my nursing journals, there was an article about the benefits of telehealth, and they listed benefits related to increased access and convenience and save time, things like that. And I immediately just turned around and did a letter to the editor that just added kind of a yes and. I like to be positive when I can, but I was like, yes, and those are all great benefits, but it also saves energy and is better for our environment, related to telehealth benefits. And I think that particular journal will only publish if you're responding. They'll only
Mm.
publish letters to editors if you're responding, but I just make it kind of a habit to read sometimes when I'm scanning. And if there's something that's in this lane, then I'll frequently send back a letter to the editor real quickly, a response.
Yeah, that's a great example of how like responding to a piece that was already written in an outlet can work out while you're writing an LT or op-ed. So yeah, that's a great example, Janice. Thank you for sharing that. Um, any other questions? Oh, I see John.
So I think there are a lot of like local news web outlets, like here in the Northern Virginia area and probably elsewhere. I don't look at them a lot, but I look at them sometimes. So are the I've never looked to see if they are publishing op-eds or if they have letters to the editor. But is something like that if they do have letters to the editor, is that another option? Most of your examples seem to refer to print newspapers, which I love, but I'm just wondering.
Yeah, so it really varies on the outlet. So I have seen some like broadcasting outlets who have like they'll publish articles on their website. Um, the challenge with that is finding who to submit it to. And
Yeah.
so what I would recommend is try to look on their website to see if they have like an opinion section. That would be your first clue that they might accept pieces like this. And then it doesn't hurt to send it to they're usually like a general opinion inbox or a general tip inbox if you want to try to submit it there. But yeah, I've seen some that do and some that don't. It just really varies on that particular station. Yeah, definitely a good idea to consider those as well.
And a related question. So, if we're trying to submit something or write something that's a statewide issue, which is really, the focus of what we're talking about here, are there newspapers or media outlets that would be, a best bet? I know you mentioned one that was progressive. I think one of the examples you showed, they had a policy of, we won't publish anything that you've submitted somewhere else, and that kind of is in tension with your other recommendation to give somebody 3 to 5 days before you kind of move on to another possible to submitting it somewhere else. So is there a success track record in any of the options that we might have here for statewide attention?
Sure, and let me clarify the second half of that first. So with the policy that I showed about like it can't be work you've already submitted somewhere else. What they mean by that is if you are sending out all at once, so you send it to 15 different outlets at the same time, and so let's say you send a piece to the Richmond Times-Dispatch, for example, and you don't hear back after a few days, you email them, you still don't hear back. And then usually what I try to do, this I should have probably mentioned this, when I do follow up, I typically say, hey, just wanted to follow up on the piece I submitted. If I don't hear back by this date and time, I'll assume that you're not interested, and I'll move on to another outlet. That way, it doesn't create that opportunity or that possibility for you to have moved on to, let's say, the Virginia Mercury, and then Richmond Times-Dispatch sees the one you submitted and tries to publish it at the same time. So it creates that, clear communication. So I hope that clarifies what I meant by that. And then can you say your first part of the question again?
Sorry, it was kind of a run-on, wasn't it?
Oh, no, you're good.
Well, one of the questions I had is there a strategy for targeting certain papers that you feel might be more effective for particular issues? Is there a track record of success with some papers on certain issues, or? It's hard
Generally, I would say, no, it's hard to tell. Like in different papers, we'll have like different themes. So, like for example, I'm going to go on the environmental, talk for a second. If you're submitting a piece about, let's say, like something about the Chesapeake Bay, there is an outlet called the Bay Journal where all they cover is pieces and stories about issues that affect the Chesapeake Bay area. And so, like, if you target them that way, there are others that sometimes you have to kind of just like go around and do a little research about like what different outlets want to cover. That would be my best recommendation.
Okay.
And you can literally you can type in is newspapers in Virginia that care about this, or just
Yeah.
newspapers in Virginia and go through and read the About Us section. That's typically how I find outlets to submit to. And like I guess a success story, if that I think that was part of your question.
Right.
We did an op-ed last year about social determinants of health. So those kind of non-medical factors that contribute to health outcomes. So access to healthcare to start, grocery stores, schools, education, the presence of pollution in a community. And we kind of discovered the Cardinal News, which covers that south side part of Virginia and rural issues. And so we kind of tailored the op-ed a little bit to talk to kind of reference how this could impact rural communities. And so that's another way to kind of target your piece to an outlet that has a specific, focused area.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
I want to make sure. Okay. Of course. And if you have any, like, if you want to talk about this more too, I extend this offer to everyone. Always happy to hop on a call, or if you want to email me, I'll drop my contact information in afterwards. But always happy to help with stuff like that. Any other questions? All right, well, we'll go ahead and move on. We have a few minutes left. And so my closing question to everyone is, after we've done this presentation today, we saw some examples. Now I want to know, what LTE or op-ed are you going to write? Or what topic are you going to write about after leaving here today? So you can put it in the chat if you want to come off mute. And it's okay if you don't know, but maybe just, what does your gut say you want to write about? Well, I'll
Paid
tell
sick
you, I want to.
days.
Oh, go ahead, Amanda. Sorry.
I was gonna say paid sick days for all Virginians.
Yes. I was gonna say, I want to write about these really high energy bills that are going up, 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 and up, and people can't afford their medications or groceries because of how high the energy bills are. That's what I want to write about. What else we got? Okay, we got energy bills and data centers from John. Could not agree more. Not that I'm biased or anything. Um, Casino at Tyson's, okay. Educational piece about redistricting. Um, Issue as a choice of principle. Okay, okay. Love it. Anything else people want to share? All right. Well, if you want to, yes, I'm registering, I think. Okay. Um, yes, there's a lot of misinformation. Um, but yeah, if it comes to mind, feel free to drop it in the chat of things you want to write about. And we can go ahead and move on to the next slide. So, as we close, want to offer you some opportunities to stay engaged with both of our organizations. So, on your screen, we have QR codes to follow VIPL on social media, as well to join our mailing list if you've not already done so. We have our social media tags there. And then, Amanda, I'll let you talk about your slide.
Sorry, y'all. Technology is great when it works, but I hope you all can see my screen. We have our social media for Virginia Interfaith here that you can scan. Also, a QR code to join our mailing list. And you can visit our website for more information as well. And as Connor said, we will be sending these slides out. So you will have this information after the meeting as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Amanda. I went ahead, I dropped our link tree, and also I put my email in there for anyone who has any lingering questions or things they want to talk about. Always feel free to reach out. But yeah, that is all we have for you tonight. We're ending 3 minutes early. I think that's a record. So thank you all for joining us. I'm happy to stay on for a few minutes if anyone has any other questions. But if not, we will see you all very soon. Thanks so much.